My name is LaConya Gilbert. I grew up in Menlo Park, California, and I'm going to share the story of how I endured trauma in the household, but also found a way to redeem myself. When I was first born, my mother brought me home to a shared home. We kind of all lived together. My mom, her sister, my great aunt, because it was her home. And I had 2 cousins at the time. We moved into our own apartment pretty early on. And in that house, there was myself, my grandfather, my mom, and my dad. Until about 5, we went back and forth from my own apartment to my great aunt's house because we all kind of like lived together and everything. And my great aunt's house was my aunt's son. He lived there also because she had left him here in California. We were a tight-knit family. We all kind of grew up together. My cousins were more like my siblings, and then my brother was born. My grandfather was in and out. He was a really good grandfather, but he was a compulsive gambler. From the age of birth until about 4 or 5 years old, I don't have any bad memories. Like, it was full of love. We were all very much a church-going family, very much involved in the church. When I was 5 years old, and it had to be about 1991, is when the nightmare began. I remember coming home from church one day. It had to be like 2 or 3 p.m. and we went to Grandma, which was my great aunt's house, but we called her Grandma. I was taking a nap, and then I feel hands on me. I feel someone touching me, and it woke me up out of my sleep. And that is the first instance. And it started off just like that. He started just touching and things like that. And over the years, no doubt it progressed. I don't know what I was thinking. I couldn't even understand, honestly. Like, I was so confused as to what was going on because obviously I'm 5. I hadn't watched any movies with any sexual contact or anything of that nature by that time. And yes, this was my older cousin, and I trusted him. He was also a counselor at our youth program that we attended. Like, we would go every summer, and he was a youth counselor because, mind you, he's 8 years older than me. I don't think the threatening started until I got a little older and I started to question what was going on. I was about 6 or 7 years old is when he started to threaten and to say things like, well, no one's going to believe you. And it wasn't just me that it happened to. It was 3 other cousins. But at this time, it was myself and my older cousin because the other 2 cousins hadn't come into play yet. My older cousin had gone and tried to tell the adults in our family what was going on, and she got a whooping because my great aunt said that she was lying. Those were her exact words: "Don't lie on that boy." And so I watched my cousin get a whooping, and that scared me to death. Later on in life, after it came out that these things happened to myself and to the 3 other cousins, it was told that some things had happened to him. So something happened to him by another male family member, and they swept that under the rug. He was a child when what happened to him happened, and no one helped him. It's like once it started, any chance he had to be alone with any of us, he took advantage of that. And I started to notice that he would try to isolate us and get us to be alone with him. He would send the other cousins away if it was me or if it was my other cousin, whatever the case is. And it started to happen quite frequently. I lived in the other part of town, but I was at my great aunt's house almost every day. And he would try to make a game out of it and things like that, like anything to try to make us feel comfortable, like this was normal behavior. I was tiny and I was a good kid. Even with everything that was going on, I was good, like in school and everything. I think when I turned either 9 or 10, we were taking sex ed, and that's when the blinders were removed. That's when everything started to make sense to me. That's when I knew something's not right here. And that's when I started acting up too also. The first time he actually had me to perform certain acts on him, I want to say I was like 8. He also was doing things like shoes. I really was into shoes when I was young, and he was really like into fashion and dressing and stuff. He would give me like his coats and stuff like that. Honestly, I thought my big cousin was like the best thing going. And he would do things to like groom us and me, and he would pit us against each other. This week, this one would be the favorite. Next week, this one would be the favorite. He knew what he was doing. I didn't know. And to be honest, like my mom, he was her favorite. Because when my aunt left him here, my mom took on the role of like caring for him and looking out for him. And so when I started to show that I was uncomfortable with him being around, because he would spend the night at our house also, and my mom would bring him to our homes on the weekends and stuff. And I started to show that I was uncomfortable with him being around. But my mom, she felt responsible for him because of what had happened to him. She felt like she had to be there for him. She had to be the good auntie, not knowing that he's literally destroying your child. And I expressed that I was uncomfortable with him being around. I would say, why does he have to come over every time? And I would say something, but I don't think she ever really paid too much attention to it. In the midst of everything that I'm going through at home, feeling honestly misunderstood, because that's about the time I started to get in trouble. I was like maybe 9 years old. I started getting in trouble at school, just acting out because of what was going on. And so my mom started treating me differently also, because now you took this kid that had like straight A's, good grades, the whole nine, and now she's acting out, doing things like, writing letters to boys. I got a whooping for that. I think I was like 10 when that happened. I used to escape home as much as possible just to be away from the house, so I didn't have to keep dealing with the abuse. And my cousin's mother, she dropped me off on the porch and didn't wait for my grandfather to open the door. Mind you, she was an addict at the time. So part of me doesn't blame her, but the other part of me is like, I was like 9 years old. She left me on the porch. My grandfather was in the house asleep. He never got up to answer the door for me. And there was a stranger that rode up the street on a bike and asked me for directions. I'm like 9 years old. At the time, I'm not thinking that this person could potentially cause me harm or anything like that. When I started to give her directions, I was standing pretty close to her. She was on the sidewalk and I was standing in my yard. She grabbed me and she asked me to tell her where she wanted to go, or whatever the case is. And I told her. She said, if you don't come with me, you'll never see your mom and your grandfather again. So this is obviously someone who knew me. I didn't know her, but she knew me and had to have been watching me. So that was really one of the most scary things. And during that time, there were a lot of kids that came up missing from East Palo Alto and Menlo Park. The abuse lasted until I was about, I want to say 13 or 14 years old, until I was able to speak up for myself and say, hey, and I told him, if you touch me again, I will do something to you. You cannot keep doing this. He took my virginity. The first boy that I ever willingly engaged in sex with, he didn't even know that I was a virgin. We talked years later after that, and I told him what happened to me. And he apologized. LaConya, I'm so sorry. I didn't know that happened to you, all of these things. But at that point, it was too late. But as far as the acting out, I started fighting. I was fighting literally every day and everybody. And the school had to call my mom all the time because I was fighting everybody. Girls, boys, it didn't matter. Adults at that time didn't like me because I was so mouthy. Like I would just pop off at whoever, whenever. I think a lot of it was because I felt like I didn't have control over my life and what was happening to me. So outside the home, any opportunity that I had to exert myself, to assert myself, to take control over what was going on, I took control. But I realize now, a lot of the times growing up, I didn't have a lot of friends because I was very argumentative. I was combative. I was defensive. I was a menace. I will be honest. I feel like I had a lot of anger inside of me because of what was happening to me, not feeling protected. And it seemed like during that time of my life, everyone was abusing me. Everyone was misusing me. And everyone had failed me. And so when I would be out in public, at school, at church, because I even got into fights at church, I felt like I needed to defend myself by any means necessary at all costs. I was 12. The first time I tried to tell my mom what was going on. When I asked her a hypothetical question about, hey mom, if this were happening to me, what would you do? She told me that one, she would go to jail. because she would handle the situation. 2, she would be upset with me for not having said something sooner. I held it because one thing about me is I never wanted my mom to be upset with me. I just wanted my mom to be proud of me. I felt bad for all the stuff that I was doing to cause her trouble. And I never wanted her to be upset with me. I never wanted her to be disappointed in me. And I felt like she was already disappointed with me. I felt like she loved my little brother more than she loved me, and she gave him more attention. I didn't want to lose her, because who else was going to take care of us? I wasn't just thinking about myself. I was thinking about my little brother, because who's going to care for us? My granddad was old. My grandfather, my papa as we call him, he was old. My dad was non-existent in our lives. Who was going to care for us? If my mom went to jail and now my little brother blames me for what I went through, he says that no one in the family cared about him because they were too busy worried about me and what I was going through. I finally told everyone what was going on when they found out that I was pregnant. I was in high school. I had gotten into a fight while I was pregnant, and the nurse at school told my mom, "Did you know she's pregnant?" My mom said no. So I tell my mom, and mind you, at the time I was so scared because honestly I did not know if my child was my boyfriend's at the time or my cousin's. I was so scared. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to handle that. And when I told my mom, "Hey, this is what's going on. I don't even know if it's your nephews or not, because this is what's been going on all these years." My mom told me, "Well, how am I supposed to believe you with all the you've been doing?" And those were her exact words. I just kind of withdrew. And mind you, she found out, I think we found out, it was like 5 months already. And my boyfriend at the time, thank God. So I had my son and I raised my child alone. I actually entered into an abusive relationship 6 months after my son was born. Looking for love? That went on for years. I even left, joined the military, and came back home to that. And it wasn't until one day that we were fighting and he was choking me. And I could feel, this wasn't the first time then, because he's the whole reason I left and joined the military in the first place. Because I feared that he was going to kill me or I was going to end up in prison. But he was choking me one day, and my son had to be 5 or 6 years old. And he was in the home. And that's the first time I was really afraid that I was going to lose my life. And the thought crossed my mind, like, who's going to explain this to your son? What happened to you? And you're staying all because you feel this is the only person that's ever going to love you. That was about a 7-year span, I want to say. I knew that he was going to do something to me or I was going to do something to him to protect myself and my son. Well, not necessarily my son, because, and this sounds weird, but he really took care of my son like that was actually his child. Because I was with him like maybe 6 months or 7 months after my son was born. I felt like he cared more for my son than he did for me. But you can't really love my son and treat me the way that you're treating me and harm me. And there was an incident where he put a pillowcase over my head, locked me in the closet. He stood outside with a shotgun so I couldn't get out. He chased me outside to my car one day with my son in tow. I had my son in hand with a firearm, and he pulled the trigger, but it didn't go off. It jammed. And that's when I knew I had to leave. And I turned around, married someone else in the military. He cheated on me. I came home and I ended up right back in that same abusive relationship just because I felt like he was really the only person who cared about me. My mother finally understood and realized what really happened because my younger cousin, and this is when I was in the military, I was in boot camp at the time. My younger cousin told a counselor at school what was happening to her. The counselor reported it. We get a phone call from the detectives. They arrested him. They had all of us testify. I was out of state because I was in boot camp at the time, which I'm dealing with all of this stuff. And then I'm also having to deal with giving my testimony and all these other things. At that exact moment, I wanted to end it. I didn't even want to live anymore. It was so much that I had endured and going through. I was so tired. But my cadre, when I was in boot camp, they kept me strong. They talked to me all the time. They knew the situation because they had to answer the phones for the detectives. And they kept me strong. They talked me through it. They told me, hey, Gilbert, we know you went through what you went through, but you're so strong. You're doing this. Like, mind you, I broke my foot in boot camp and all types of stuff. But I still made it. I still graduated. I pushed through. And at that moment, I knew I was strong, stronger than what people had given me credit for, stronger than what I had given myself credit for. And my mom had no choice but to acknowledge this really happened. Currently, my abuser is paying for what he did to me and my cousins and some of the other girls in the community. He's still in prison. He went up for parole, I think about a year ago, and he declined the parole, saying that he needed more time to work on himself. My mother apologized for not believing me, but her actions never showed that she was sorry for what happened to me. Her and my brother still gang up on me. They still bring up things from the past and say how bad I was or whatever the case is. To me, it wasn't really genuine. Her behavior towards me, I don't feel like ever really changed. I think I still carry the guilt and shame because the people that were put in places to protect me never did. My mom didn't believe me when I told her. When my father found out, who was non-existent in my life, he never tried to step up and change the narrative of his relationship in my life. My little brother blames me because he says that the people in our family didn't care about him because they were too busy worried about me, which is not true because my truth didn't come out until I was an adult. Every man that I've ever been in a relationship with, that I've shared what happened to me, no one has ever chosen to protect me. So I feel like it's my fault. And I felt like if I would have stood up for myself, maybe I could have helped them. Maybe it would not have happened to my younger cousin. And then I just also felt bad because it happened to other girls in our community because it came out later on. It wasn't just us he did it to. It was other girls in the community. I feel like it's important for me to share my story because just like I said before, that there were other girls in the community that went through what we went through. If we had spoken up sooner, maybe they would have felt the courage to speak up sooner. Maybe he would have been arrested sooner. Maybe he would not have been able to continue doing what he was doing. He really wrecked a community. And for me, for other women and men, because I know men go through it too, you don't have to feel ashamed. I don't want people to feel ashamed for what was done to them. You're not to blame. As long as people live with that guilt and shame, they're not going to come out and say anything. They're going to be afraid to speak up. I want people to know that it's not your fault and you need to speak up as soon as possible because your perpetrator is the one. Your abuser is the one who should be shamed, not you. Because that's what I was doing. I was putting up with abuse from everybody in my life because I didn't feel like I was worth anything else. I've been working security for years, but the last post that I took, I was working at the Juvenile Justice Center in San Leandro as an armed guard. That's when I decided to apply at the Juvenile Justice Center. I'm now in school at Grand Canyon University, finishing my degree in behavioral science. I want to work with the youth that have colorful backgrounds like myself. So maybe they can feel like somebody cares about them. And I really feel like that's really what it boils down to. Because if someone would have taken me and showed me that love that I was looking for, I think things may have turned out differently for me. I want to be that person. I want to work in either like a juvenile justice center or even a school as like a counselor and just give back to what I feel is my community.